Have you ever looked around and realized the phone doesn't ring like it used to? The coffee invites don't come as often. Old friends fade into the background, and suddenly, your days feel a little quieter than they used to. And for a moment, you wonder, did I do something wrong? Or is this just what aging looks like? It's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you've spent your life showing up for others. You've been kind. You've been generous. You've been the one to bend over backward when someone needed help. So when people start pulling away, it's natural to feel confused, even hurt. But here's something I want you to really sit with today. Sometimes, when people disappear from your life, it's not because you failed. It's because you finally stopped allowing yourself to be used. See, kindness is a beautiful thing. But kindness without boundaries? That's where the cracks begin to show. And as we get older, we start to see more clearly who was in our life out of love and who was there out of convenience. Maybe you've noticed it too. That one friend who only called when they needed to vent, but never asked how you were doing. That family member who expected you to drop everything for them, but disappeared the moment you needed a hand. These aren't just isolated moments. Over time, they reveal a pattern. And when you stop feeding that pattern, when you finally say no instead of sure, I'll do it, people like that tend to fade. But fading isn't always a bad thing. In fact, sometimes it's the clearest sign that you're beginning to grow. You see, true change doesn't come from big declarations or emotional conversations. It comes quietly. It comes the moment you decide to protect your peace. When you realize you don't have to explain yourself to everyone. When you understand that it's not your job to fix people or carry their burdens while ignoring your own. It might feel strange at first. You've probably spent decades playing the role of the helper, the caregiver, the one who keeps the peace in the family, or the glue in your friend group. But here's the truth. You are allowed to change roles. You are allowed to put yourself first. And that shift, it's powerful. You may find that some people react badly to it. They might say you're being selfish. They may pull away, give you the cold shoulder, or try to guilt you back into your old ways. But remember this. People who truly care about you don't punish you for having boundaries. They respect you for it. So if people stop talking to you when you stop overgiving, if they distance themselves when you stop bending, let them. That silence might be the most honest answer you'll ever get. And in that silence, something else begins to bloom. Your self-worth. Because when you no longer stretch yourself thin just to keep everyone happy, you start to notice something remarkable. You have more energy. You sleep better. You feel lighter. The weight of pleasing others begins to lift. And what takes its place is peace. Peace doesn't always look like a quiet room. Sometimes peace is a loud no to what doesn't serve you anymore. Sometimes peace is a solo walk, a cup of coffee with yourself, or turning off your phone and reading a book without guilt. Now I know. We were raised in a time when sacrifice was worn like a badge of honor. We were told love means doing whatever it takes, no matter how much it costs us. And to some extent, that's true. Love does require effort, but it should never require you to shrink. Real love, the kind that lasts through decades, through change, through hardship, makes room for who you are. It doesn't ask you to stay small so others can feel more comfortable. It doesn't demand that you carry everyone else's emotions while ignoring your own. If you're finding that some relationships feel one-sided, if you're the only one checking in or the only one showing up, it's okay to step back. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. You are not required to maintain every connection simply because it's old. You are not responsible for healing people who refuse to grow. You are not obligated to keep being the strong one, just so others don't have to be. Let me tell you something that might sound hard at first, but stay with me. Some people liked you better when you were easier to use. And that hurts. But it's freeing. Because once you stop trying to earn love by giving more than you receive, you make space for the kind of connection that's rooted in truth. The kind that doesn't waver when you set a boundary. The kind that supports your growth, not just your giving. And yes, there will be loss. There will be friends who drift away, conversations that don't happen anymore, and birthdays where the phone doesn't ring. But not all loss is tragic. Some loss is clearing the way. Sometimes, losing the wrong people gives you the room to find the right ones, or even better, to find yourself again. You start to rediscover what you like to do, what brings you joy, what makes you feel alive. Maybe it's painting again, or gardening, or sitting by the window in the morning sun with a warm cup of tea and not a single thing on your schedule. Maybe it's starting a journal, joining a group that aligns with your values, or simply giving yourself permission to rest without guilt. These small acts, they rebuild you. And soon enough, you'll notice that you no longer feel lonely, because the space that others left behind is now filled with your own presence, your own voice, your own peace. And peace, my friend, is worth protecting, especially now. Because you've lived long enough to know the difference between being alone and being at peace. You've seen how people come and go, how some stick around only when it's convenient. And now, you have the wisdom to choose differently. You no longer need to be everything to everyone. You don't have to pick up the phone every time it rings or say yes just to keep the peace. You don't have to explain yourself, defend your decisions, or prove your worth. You already are enough. You already are worthy. And you deserve relationships that feel like home, not like work. You deserve conversations that nourish you, not drain you. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you provide. So if the silence has grown louder lately, if the circle has gotten smaller, take a deep breath. That may not be the end of something. It may just be the beginning of a season, where your kindness is no longer taken for granted, where your energy isn't used up by people who don't pour anything back in, where your presence is treated like a gift, not a convenience, and where you finally realize that peace isn't something you find in others. It's something you reclaim for yourself. There's a certain beauty in aging that no one tells you about when you're younger. You begin to see things more clearly, not with your eyes, but with your spirit. You stop chasing approval. You stop tolerating what drains you. And somewhere along the way, you stop apologizing for wanting peace over chaos. But this clarity doesn't always come gently. Often, it's born through heartbreak, through confusion, through the aching silence left by people you once thought would be with you forever. It's easy to think something is wrong when others fall away. But what if I told you those losses weren't punishments? What if they were invitations to come home to yourself? Because here's something powerful. True change doesn't happen when you're trying to please people. It happens the moment you realize that pleasing everyone is not your job anymore. At some point in life, especially as we get older, we begin to understand that keeping the peace on the outside while feeling unrest on the inside is a trade-off we can no longer afford. That's when boundaries are born. Boundaries are not walls. They're not punishments. They're not you being mean or difficult. Boundaries are clarity. They're the gentle lines that protect your energy, your heart, and your well-being. And if someone is offended by your boundaries, chances are they benefited from you having none. Think about that. When you start saying no, really saying no, not just with your words, but with your time, your presence, your willingness to be the emotional sponge for everyone else, the people who depended on that version of you will notice. And not all of them will like it. Some might accuse you of changing. But the truth is, you're not becoming someone else. You're becoming someone you were always meant to be, just without the people-pleasing mask. It's like walking out of a fog. You realize how much of your time was spent in survival mode, trying to keep relationships alive that were long past their expiration date. You remember the times you said yes, when your whole body wanted to say no. You remember the exhaustion of being there for others, while no one seemed to be there for you. But now you've learned. And the most beautiful part? You've started honoring yourself. That's what scares people who've gotten used to you always giving, always bending, always being available. Because once you reclaim your time and your emotional energy, the scales shift. You stop giving from a place of guilt and start giving from a place of choice. That's powerful. And power, real, grounded, calm power, makes users and manipulators uncomfortable. You may even hear things like, "You've changed." And yes, you have. Because staying the same in the face of emotional exhaustion is not strength. It's suppression. And you, my friend, are done suppressing who you are. This is not a rebellion. It's a return. A return to your worth. A return to your voice. A return to the self you may have lost while taking care of everyone else. It doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop abandoning yourself in the name of love. Because love, real love, doesn't ask for unconditional sacrifice. That's a myth we were sold. We were told that to love well means to give endlessly, to put others first, to carry the weight of everyone's needs. But the truth is, unconditional love is not the same as unconditional self-sacrifice. You can love deeply and still have boundaries. You can care without being used. You can show up for others while still showing up for yourself. And that is a kind of love we all deserve. One that says, "I see you, I care, but I won't lose myself for you." There's freedom in that. There's healing in that. Because when you stop sacrificing your peace just to keep people in your life, you start attracting people who value peace as much as you do. It might take some time. You might feel lonely at first. But loneliness and emptiness are not the same thing. Sometimes the space others leave behind is necessary for the right people to walk in, or for you to hear your own voice again. You might find joy in the quiet moments. Something that used to feel like isolation now feels like calm. You might find energy returning, not because life is easier, but because your heart isn't being pulled in 20 directions anymore. And you may discover that your best years aren't behind you. They're in front of you. Because now, you get to live on your terms. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of clarity and purpose. The people who faded away, they were never going to appreciate the new you anyway. Their absence is not your failure, it's their choice. Let them go. Not with bitterness, but with peace. You're not shutting them out. You're just no longer shrinking to fit inside their comfort zones. And the people who remain, the ones who respect your space, who listen when you speak, who don't demand emotional labor without offering support in return, those are the ones worth keeping close. You deserve relationships that feel mutual, not manipulative. You deserve friendships where silence isn't a punishment but a shared peace. You deserve love that grows with you, not love that only survives when you play small. And yes, sometimes it takes going through loss to find all that. Sometimes the pain of being misunderstood, of being let go, of being talked about, is exactly what leads you to the most authentic version of yourself. It's not always easy. It can be messy. You'll question yourself. You'll miss people who hurt you. You'll wonder if setting boundaries was too much. But keep going. Because on the other side of this discomfort is your freedom. On the other side of these goodbyes is a hello. To yourself, to your peace, to the version of you that no longer needs to earn love by being overly available or endlessly forgiving. You're not cold for protecting your peace. You're not harsh for choosing yourself. You're wise. You've been through enough to know that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Some people were only ever meant to be chapters. But you are the author. You decide what stays, what ends, and what begins. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth. You don't need permission to stop being someone's emotional crutch. And you certainly don't have to keep carrying guilt for things you didn't break. Breathe that in. You've earned the right to protect your joy. You've earned the right to change. You've earned the right to say, I am no longer available for relationships that cost me my peace. Because when you start living like that, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop seeking validation and start feeling grounded. You stop fearing who's leaving and start trusting who's meant to stay. And most of all, you begin to fall in love, not with the idea of being loved by others, but with the reality of being loved by yourself. One of the hardest parts of getting older isn't just the changes in our bodies or the slowing of our pace. It's watching the relationships we once held close begin to shift or disappear entirely. It's realizing that some of the people we thought would be with us until the end were only meant to walk with us for a while. And while that truth can be painful, it can also be liberating. Because here's something most people don't understand until much later in life. Not every connection is meant to last. Some relationships come into your life to teach you something. Some arrive to reflect a version of yourself you've since outgrown, and others, well, some were only ever there for what they could take. That may sound harsh, but it's real. There are people who don't truly miss you. They miss the access. They miss the comfort of knowing you'd always be there to help, to listen, to clean up the mess. They miss the power they felt when you put their needs before your own. But once you stop doing that, once you stop breaking your back just to keep the peace, they vanish. And at first, their silence might feel like abandonment. But in time, you'll see it for what it is. Relief. Space. A clearing for something better. Because once you stop trying to earn your place in someone's life, you realize the people who truly value you don't need convincing. They don't disappear when you set a boundary. They don't punish you for choosing peace. They respect you more for it. This is where your healing begins. When you no longer attach your worth to how many people like you, or call you, or invite you. When you stop basing your happiness on being needed. When you stop giving so much of yourself that there's nothing left for you. You're not meant to be everything to everyone. You're not supposed to be available at all times. You're not supposed to smile through exhaustion or listen endlessly without being heard in return. And you're certainly not supposed to tolerate relationships that feel like transactions, where your kindness is exchanged for someone's convenience. Some people will only like you as long as you make life easier for them. The moment you stop, they vanish. That's not friendship. That's not love. That's using. But you're learning to see the difference. And that clarity, that awakening, is worth celebrating. Because now you can finally begin to build your life around relationships that feed your soul, not drain it. That means letting go of people who make you feel like too much or not enough. It means pulling back from those who gossip more than they listen. It means no longer explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You can still forgive them. You can even wish them well, but you don't have to let them back in. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. It means choosing not to carry the weight of resentment. It means acknowledging the hurt while deciding not to let it harden you. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because you deserve freedom. Freedom from bitterness. Freedom from pretending. Freedom from being the version of yourself that was always tired, always overlooked, always stretching to meet other people's needs while ignoring your own. And as you step into this freedom, something else will begin to rise, your sense of self. You'll notice it in the small things. The way you no longer say yes out of guilt. The way you pause before answering, because now you check in with yourself first. The way your days feel quieter, but also calmer. The way your heart no longer races when the phone rings. You're no longer bracing for the next demand. You've made peace a priority, and that changes everything. Some people may not understand it. They may say you've pulled away. Let them talk. You're not pulling away. You're pulling in. Back into yourself. Back into your joy. Back into the things you once loved, but forgot in the rush of always being needed. You start reading again, not to pass time, but to feed your mind. You take walks, not to escape the house, but to enjoy your own company. You drink your coffee slowly, savoring the quiet. And maybe, just maybe, you realize you were never truly lonely. You were just overdue for stillness. Stillness isn't emptiness. Stillness is presence. And presence is the soil where the next version of you can grow. You don't have to bloom fast. Some roots grow deep before they ever rise above ground. Maybe that's what this season is for. Not to be loud, not to be visible, but to go deeper. To strengthen who you are beneath the surface. Because you're still growing, even now. You haven't stopped learning. You haven't stopped discovering. And you haven't stopped becoming. This is a powerful truth. Some of the most profound healing doesn't happen in your 30s or 40s. It happens later. It happens when you finally stop apologizing for your boundaries. When you stop making excuses for people's poor behavior. When you stop tolerating what you now know was never love in the first place. It happens when you finally realize, I've been enough all along. I was just too busy proving it to see it. So if people have stopped talking to you, if some friendships have faded, if you're no longer invited to the same gatherings or included in the same conversations, take a moment to check in with yourself. Not from a place of sadness, but from a place of awareness. Ask yourself, am I at peace? And if the answer is yes, let that be enough. Because the people who disappeared when you stopped giving more than you had, they were never your tribe. The ones who remain now, the ones who don't need you to perform, to please, or to prove anything, those are your people. And you don't need a crowd. You need truth. Truth in your connections. Truth in how you live. Truth in how you love. You're not here to be consumed. You're here to be cherished. And if that means having fewer friends, fewer phone calls, fewer invites, so be it. Because what you've gained in return is something far more valuable. Your peace, your clarity, your self-respect. And those things, they're the foundation of a truly fulfilling life. So take a deep breath. Feel the quiet around you and within you, not as loss, but as alignment. This is your time. Time to stop explaining. Time to stop chasing. Time to stop overgiving. Time to start choosing you. Let others fall away if they must. Let the circle shrink if it needs to. Because what's left now is real. And real love, real friendship, real joy never demands that you lose yourself to keep it. You've spent a lifetime showing up for others. Now it's time to show up for you. And as you do, don't be surprised if new people start to enter your life. People who meet you where you are, who see your worth without you having to perform it. People who love you for your presence, not your usefulness. That's the gift of letting go. That's the reward of living with honesty. And that, my friend, is what you deserve. Every single day from here forward. If this message touched something in you, I hope you'll take a moment to leave a comment and share your thoughts. You never know who else might need to hear what you have to say. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, Strong Elderly Life, for more conversations like this. Gentle reminders that you're not alone, you're not invisible, and you are more powerful than you realize. Here's to living your best life on your terms. You've earned it. You always have. And it's never too late to begin again.